Hello and welcome back to another episode of the First Brick Property Podcast. My name is KM and I'll be your host for today's episode, and that is episode 32. Now, the purpose of the podcast is to bring a casual style show to discuss all things property, with education being the key. Today I will be going alone. No one with me today. End of year, people are getting a little bit busy, hard to schedule, so I'll do another one just myself. So to the listeners, I apologize. You're going to have to keep listening to my voice for another episode or so. We've had some little issues setting this up with the camera as well as the microphone for some reason today. So hopefully everything goes through smoothly and you can hear me quite good. So as Australia quickly recovers from the recession we chose to have, and a tumultuous year, really poor year, with COVID and bushfires and floods, and not the most exciting year comes to an end, I thought it would be good to do a sort of a year in review, a December wrap of all the states and cities around the country. And around the country, look around the grounds, look at which areas have seen growth, which areas haven't, and what's expected to happen. So we'll start off with this week's auction clearance rate. And the auction clearance rate this week auction activity actually ramped up this week. We had 2,537 properties across the country go to auction. Last week we had 2,085, so an increase of about 500 properties from last week. However, this time last year, there was 2,804 properties that went to auction. So a little bit down compared to last year, but considering the year we've had, the 300 difference actually quite good. The overall clearance rate for the week was 74.6%. That's likely to go down once more numbers come through. Last week, 75.1%. We are coming towards the end of the year. There is less activity as well in the market, but that is some pretty strong, solid numbers. We look at some early market indicators for the week. Newly advertised properties for sale, 6.49% down for the month compared to last month. However, properties for rent up 4.88% compared to last month. Mortgage activity, this is a really good sign actually. There's a lot of activity happening in terms of finance. So we've had a 20.86% increase in overall mortgage activity from last fortnight compared to this fortnight, and an 8% overall year-to-date increase in mortgage activity compared to last year. Now, if you consider the year we've had, that 8% increase year-to-date is a huge number. Very, very good stuff. Most likely due to lowest interest rates we've ever had, and we'll get into that now. If we look at the purpose of the loans, 62.74% of the mortgage activity has been refinancing. So of all mortgage activity, 63% has been refinance. And again, interest rates are record lows. Why wouldn't you be refinancing, getting the lowest possible rate you can get? This is 16.6% up on this time on year to date of last year. If we look at new purchases, the reason for loan being a purchase, 25% of all mortgage activity has been due to a purchase. That's a 7.95% increase of year to date. Construction loans have been up, that make up 12.2%, and that's 20.58% increase on year to date last year. Now, very big one here is mortgagee in possession numbers. So during COVID, we had a lot of people, a lot of so-called experts, and a lot of publications, a lot of newspapers, a lot of media promote we will be having a market crash. Property is going to bust. Sell, get out while you can. The world's on fire, and a lot of people were saying consumers were not going to be able to pay off their loans. Loan deferral periods are going to be cut. It's not going to work. A whole bunch of stuff, and as a result, we're going to see a lot of people having to sell their homes because they can't afford their mortgages. This is mortgagee in possession. Now we look at the mortgagee in possession numbers. It's actually down 40% compared to last year, which is crazy. The reason we're seeing a drop compared to last year, obviously, and you're thinking, how do we drop mortgage in possession numbers compared to last year, especially during the year we had people losing their jobs and whatnot. The banks and the government stimulus have been very good. The banks, obviously, the loan deferral periods, the loan holidays being extended if you are eligible, and the criteria is quite unique and quite tough. Not tough, it's very specific to make sure that you actually are in need of a loan deferral period and not just any Tom, Dick or Harry can just say, yeah, I need a loan deferral period. So we've seen stimulus from the banks and the government help out, and as a result we've seen 40% decrease on mortgage in possession numbers compared to last year. So if you're sitting around waiting for a whole bunch of properties to go up for close to nothing, you'll be waiting for a long time. Now let's do an around the grounds, a property market update, December wrap if you will. We'll look at numbers from the last month, the last 3 months, 6 months in the year. We'll look at houses and units. If we look at Australia as a whole, we're going to separate these into suburbs. Last month, 6,720 suburbs, this is in the housing market, saw an increase in value, and 5,925 saw a decrease in value. The increase represents 53% of the total market in Australia and 47% decrease. So we're seeing almost a 50-50 split in the last month in terms of the housing market across all of Australia. So not all properties not all suburbs are going up, and something that we discussed. You have to be very selective when it comes to asset selection. You've got to be picking the right properties. You don't want to be picking any property because you could be picking yourself a lemon or be buying a property in a poor suburb. If we look at that figure over the last 3 months, very similar. 52% of all suburbs in the housing market went up in value, and 48% have decreased. In the last 6 months, it was 60% increase, 40% decrease. And if we look at this last year, 71% of the housing market was increased and 29% had decreased. If we look at the units, the market for units in the last month, 40% had increased, 60% of the property markets with units across Australia had decreased. So that's 3,926 suburbs have actually seen a decrease. Over the last 3 months, 60% decrease. 6 months ago, it was 50-50 split. And if we look at it last year, 62% increase in unit markets. The unit market obviously a bit more volatile there. If we look at it as a whole, a very holistic view, both combined houses and units across Australia, over the last month, we've had 49% increase, 51% decrease. 9,318 suburbs have seen growth. 9,851 suburbs have seen a decrease in value over the last month. And if we circle that back to last year, we had a 68% increase combined and a 32% decrease. Now we know that we have markets within markets within markets within markets. Within Australia is not one market. Something could be happening on the East Coast, very different to what's going on the West Coast. And then within the same, you can have Queensland different to New South Wales, different to Victoria. And within that, you could have within New South Wales a market, northern New South Wales different to south of New South Wales. And then if we look within North New South Wales, we could see suburbs closer to the beach or suburbs X, Y, and Z performing different to suburbs A, B, and C. So markets within markets. So looking at it from a holistic Australia view is just kind of giving an overall idea of what's going on, but it's really quite irrelevant information if you're trying to make decisions based on that. But it's more of a what's happening in the economy kind of statement. Let's have a look at what's happening state by state and city by city. So if we start with the ACT, I was in the ACT a few days ago, the nation's capital. So we'll start there. Small market. Last month we had 76 suburbs increase, 32 suburbs decrease, so a 70% increase in this is the housing market. 70% of suburbs in the housing market in ACT saw an increase last month, while 30% saw a decrease. If we go back 3 months ago, it was 66% increase, so a little bit less. 6 months ago, it was an 81% increase, and if we look at this last year, an 89% increase in housing markets in the ACT. If we look at the unit market, it's pretty in line, a little bit lower, but in line with the nation. So 56% increase in suburbs in terms of the unit market last month, 44% drop last month. If we look at that figure over the last year, 80% of unit markets had seen an increase in value and 20% a decrease in value last year. Let's move over to Perth. Perth itself, last month in the housing market, 234 suburbs saw an increase in value, whilst 116 suburbs saw a decrease in value. That represents a 67% increase and 33% decrease. If we look at that 3 months ago in Perth, 191 markets had seen an increase in value, whilst 159 markets saw a decrease, so a 55 to 45% split. And if we look at that figure last year in the housing market in Perth, 200 suburbs saw an increase in activity, an increase in value, and 150 suburbs saw a decrease, so a 57 to 43% split. That's happening in Perth. If we look at the unit market last month, exactly in line with the nation's numbers, 40% increase, 60% decrease. And if we look at that figure last year, 145 suburbs saw an increase in value and 175 suburbs saw a decrease in value. So that's 45% of markets of suburbs in the unit market in Perth saw an increase, while 55% saw a decrease. So that's Perth. If we look at Western Australia, the rest of Western Australia, we'll see some different numbers. In the last month, 384 suburbs in the housing market saw an increase, whilst 483 suburbs in the housing market saw a decrease. So 44% of markets in the housing markets of the rest of Western Australia saw an increase, while 56% saw a decrease. If we compare that to last year, 64% of markets in the rest of Western Australia saw actually an increase in value, whilst 36% saw a decrease. So we can see that the rest of Western Australia has taken a bit of a hit. 3 months ago, it was 42% increase. 6 months ago, 53% increase. So we can see that number has steadily declined over the year for the rest of Western Australia. Now, if we look at the Northern Territory, 23 property markets, 23 suburbs saw an increase in the last month in the housing market, which represents a 33% increase, and 47 suburbs saw a decrease in value in the housing market over the last month, which was 67%. If we look at this last year, it's fairly similar, not much has changed. 27 suburbs had increased, 43 decreased, so that's a 39% increase. 6 months ago, it was a 34% increase, and 3 months ago, 39% increase. So we can see in the Northern Territory, the housing market hasn't really changed too much. There are more suburbs going down in value than there are going up in value. So we might look at Northern Territory closely if you are considering purchasing there. We'll move down to the south of Australia. So Adelaide, we'll look at the capital city. So Adelaide actually sitting strong. If we look at this time last year, the housing market, 328 suburbs had increased, representing 75% of all suburbs in the housing market in Adelaide, seeing an increase. If we look 6 months ago, it was 70%, 3 months ago, 63%, and last month, 54%. So 54% have increased, 46% have decreased. Obviously, that number has been dropping throughout the year, as we can see there, but still pretty strong numbers for Adelaide in terms of the housing market. If we look at the unit market, fairly in line with what's happening in the housing market in Adelaide, last year 64% of all suburbs had seen an increase in the unit market in value. 6 months ago it was 66%, 3 months ago 58%, and last month 52%. So in line with what was happening in the housing market. If we look at the rest of South Australia, all the other suburbs outside of Adelaide, 1 year ago, last year, we had 533 suburbs see an increase in the housing market. 57, which represented 57%. And if we look at that, which meant 395 suburbs had seen a decrease in value, which represented a 43% decrease. 43% of the market decreased within the housing market. Last month, in terms of houses, 54% had seen an increase, so that's 504 suburbs saw an increase in value, whilst 438 suburbs saw a decrease of 46%, so again, almost 50-50. Now, if we look at units in the rest of South Australia, 49% increase last month, which is 119 suburbs, and 122 suburbs saw a decrease, so 51, so almost 50-50 again. If we look at the unit market last year, in the rest of South Australia, there was 142 suburbs saw an increase in value, which represented 65%, while 77 saw a decrease in value, which represented 35%. So that's the rest of South Australia. We'll move on to Hobart and Tasmania. So Hobart last year, in terms of the housing market, saw an 89% of suburbs increase. So last year we know Hobart did really, really well. Tasmania outperformed outperformed most predictions. They did really well, had their own little mini boom. So we saw a 89% increase in all suburbs last year in the housing market. Now last month that number had dropped down to 59%, so there's been a steady decline in suburbs that are increasing. So last year was 89%, 6 months ago 77%, 3 months ago 61%, and last month 59%. So 55 suburbs within Hobart showing an increase in value, whilst 39 suburbs showed a decrease, which represented about 41%. Now, if we look at the unit market in Hobart is very small, but last year it was 86% increase, so riding that wave that all of Hobart was riding, and very quickly that's gone down to 47%, which represents 37 suburbs in the unit market, which means there's a 53% of all suburbs in the unit markets in Hobart are showing decrease in value. Now, if we look at the rest of Tasmania, last year, 79% of all housing markets in Tasmania showed an increase in value, which was 488 suburbs, and only 20% of suburbs in the rest of Tasmania actually showed a decrease in value. If we look at that last month, that 20% has risen up to 49%. So 49% of the housing market, or 49% of suburbs in the housing market in the rest of Tasmania have seen decreases in value over the last month, while 51% have seen increases. If we look at the unit market in the rest of Tasmania, again, this is quite small. Last month, 33% of suburbs saw an increase in value, while 70% saw a decrease. Comparing that to this time last year, where 70% were increasing and 30% were decreasing. So we've seen a flip there in the unit market in the rest of Tasmania. Now we'll move on to the last three big markets. So Melbourne. Obviously, Melbourne has been ravaged this year with COVID, their lockdowns. They had the longest lockdowns in the entire country. So let's see how their market has performed. The housing market last year saw 95% of suburbs. This is quite outstanding. 95% of all suburbs in the housing market last year in Melbourne saw an increase in value. 421 suburbs last year in the housing market of Melbourne went up in value, whilst 12 suburbs went down. So 5% of suburbs in Melbourne last year saw a decrease in value. 95% of suburbs in Melbourne last year saw an increase in value. Now, if we go 6 months ago, so about June, that number had gone from 95 to 62%, and 38%, so 40% of suburbs in Melbourne had seen a decrease in value 6 months ago. We go 3 months ago, so September, October, we see 70% of suburbs in Melbourne had seen a decrease in value, whilst 30% had seen an increase. Now, if we look at last month's figures, Melbourne's still recovering. Not much has changed. 70% have decreased in the housing market, whilst 30% have increased. We will be paying close attention to that Melbourne market. There's obviously been some suburb drops due to COVID, lack of activity, and obviously the circumstances that surround Melbourne. There may be some opportunities to enter that market and see quicker growth. Just depends. We'll have to look and wait for some more data to come out. Now, if we look at the unit market in Melbourne, this time last year, 80% of the market of suburbs had seen an increase in value, so that represented 340 suburbs, while 20% obviously had seen a decrease, which was about 83 suburbs. If we take that to this time last month, 169 suburbs in the unit market saw an increase, which is 40%, and 261 suburbs in the unit market of Melbourne saw a decrease, which is about 60%. Now, if we combine and we look, this time last year, Melbourne as a whole, housing and units, saw a 90% increase. And so 90% of suburbs had seen an increase in value, whilst 10% of suburbs saw a decrease in value. If we look at it last month, it's 35% of suburbs in Melbourne had seen some sort of increase, and 65% of suburbs in Melbourne saw some sort of decrease. So we'll be keeping an eye on Melbourne, see what the recovery is like in Melbourne. Now, if we look at the rest of Victoria, so Geelong, Warrnambool, Ballarat, Bendigo, the rest of Victoria, quite a big area. The story is not as bleak as Melbourne. Obviously, Melbourne being the city centre, population numbers there are quite large, so more volatile, or not volatile, more of a response to the COVID restrictions as opposed to the rest of Victoria. Let's have a look. So last year, the rest of Victoria, 75% of suburbs saw an increase in value, which was 1,523 suburbs, whilst 504 suburbs saw a decrease in value, which represented 25%. So very strong numbers for the rest of Victoria. If we scale this back to last month, 50% of housing market suburbs saw an increase last month, 50% saw a decrease last month. And that's been a steady decline. So last year was 75%, 6 months ago 63% increase, 3 months ago 53% increase, last month even 50-50. So we got to keep our eye on that to see what's been going on in the rest of Victoria, to see if there's an increase or decrease and how people will be recovering. If there is a flight outside of Melbourne, if there is a flock to the country or to the sea, people going down to Geelong, Bendigo, realizing they don't need to be working in the city anymore, we'll be keeping a close eye on those numbers to see what happens. Now, if we look at the unit market outside of Melbourne, the rest of Victoria, last year we saw 65% of suburbs with units see an increase in value, whilst 35% dropped. Take that to this month. Last month, it's flipped the script. 36% of suburbs with units saw an increase, while 64% saw a decrease. So the unit market has been struggling since last year. If you look at it, so last year, 65% increase. 6 months ago, straight 50-50. And then 3 months ago, 40 to 60%. So that dropped quite rapidly. Now let's head north to Brisbane. Sunny Brisbane. Let's have a look. Brisbane's been tracking along. It's been a suburb, a state or city that has been expected to see some growth for such a long time. Everyone's kind of waiting for Brisbane to do its thing. Let's have a look at the numbers and see how COVID was affected. And of course, Brisbane and Queensland had some very strict interstate border closures. You know, the Premier, they're not obviously allowing people to move in and out easily. So let's see how the property market reacted. Last year, 327 suburbs in the housing market saw an increase in value, whilst 87 saw a decrease. So that represented 79 or 80% of suburbs in the housing market in Brisbane saw an increase in value last year, whilst 20% saw a decrease. Quite strong numbers, similar to Melbourne. How did they perform over the year? 6 months ago, it dropped to 67% of suburbs seeing an increase in value, and 30% seeing a decrease. 3 months ago, and more of a drop. We saw that number go down to 60%. So 60% of suburbs in the housing market of Brisbane saw an increase in value, whilst 40% saw a decrease. And if we look at last month, this is the first one we've seen all year. First one we've seen across this country. Last month, we've actually seen an increase compared to 3 months ago. 64% of suburbs in the housing market of Brisbane saw an increase last month, whilst 36% saw a decrease. So 3 months ago, 60%, last month, 64%. And I can actually attest to that. We've been quite active in the Brisbane market, and if you've seen some of our videos or listened to our podcast before, you will know that the Brisbane market is quite hot at the moment, very competitive to get in. A lot of people there, a lot of people moving to Brisbane as well due to COVID. They've realised they don't need to be in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever they are for work. They can actually work remotely. Brisbane obviously offering great lifestyle, great amenities, cheap to get in as well compared to Sydney and Melbourne. So we're seeing a lot of people moving or planning to move there, and the results have been shown in the data. So 64% of all suburbs in Brisbane last month in the housing market have gone up. Now, what's the story in the unit market? Last year, 49% of unit markets had seen an increase in value, 51% decrease. 6 months ago, it was 46% increase. 3 months ago, 48% increase. Last month, 49% increase. So the unit market has been relatively steady in terms of how many suburbs have seen increases and decreases over the last year. Not much change there. Brisbane as a whole, last year, 65% of suburbs as a whole in the entire market had seen increases, while last month it was 57%. Considering that 3 months ago that number was 54%. So Brisbane looks like it's bouncing back quite nicely. Now, if we look at the rest of Queensland, so Sunny Coast, Gold Coast, Townsville, Cairns, Ipswich, Mackay, all the rest of Queensland, let's have a look at the figures. Last year, 68% of Queensland outside of Brisbane saw a housing market increase. 6 months ago, that number was 56%. 3 months ago, 46%. And if we look last month, 1,135 suburbs outside of Brisbane, the rest of Queensland in the housing market, saw an increase in value, which represented 52%. So again, an increase last month based on 3 months ago. If we look at the unit market outside of Brisbane, it's quite a small market, but we had a 50-50 split last year, and it's gone down 43%, 34%, and then last month down to 31%. So the unit market outside of Brisbane not performing too well, more suburbs decreasing as the months go past. So if we look at the rest of Queensland as a whole, the entire market, the housing and the units outside of Brisbane, 64% seen an increase last year, and then last month 46%. But again, considering 3 months ago that number was only 42%, it's a nice bit of a comeback. But that's mainly coming from the housing market, whereas the unit market has been lagging behind and actually bringing that number down. Now we'll move to our final city and state, the highest population city in the country, where most of the activity happens, the economic centre of the country, Sydney. Let's have a look. This is going to be some interesting numbers. Last year in Sydney, we saw 632 suburbs in the housing market see an increase in value. That represents 91% of all suburbs in Sydney last year saw an increase in value. So pretty much, if you bought a house last year in Sydney, if you weren't in one of those 59 suburbs, your property or your suburb went up in value. It wasn't very hard to get it wrong. 6 months ago, that number quickly dropped down to 69%. So 70% of suburbs still seeing an increase, quite strong. 3 months ago, that number dropped even further to below 50%. So 46% of suburbs in Sydney saw an increase, whilst 55% saw a decrease. And if we look at that last month, 47% of suburbs in Sydney saw an increase, 53% saw a decrease. So last month compared to 3 months ago, we've seen another 1% increase. But compared to where we were at last year, where 91% of suburbs in Sydney were going up, we are far cry from that. And we are below the 50% threshold, but we can see compared to 3 months ago, it has increased slightly. Now, let's look at the unit market in Sydney, which is sometimes a bit more volatile. Last year, 83% of suburbs with units in it saw an increase, and that was about 549 suburbs. And then if we move to 6 months ago, we see that number at 61%. If we look 3 months ago, that number was only 41% of suburbs saw an increase in value, and then last month, 40% of suburbs saw an increase in value in the unit market in Sydney. Now, that means 60% of unit markets in Sydney last month saw a decrease and continues to decrease. So we'll keep an eye on the unit market in Sydney to see what's going on there. We know that there has been a lot of building and a lot of supply in Sydney with the recent in the unit market, so we'll have to keep an eye. If we look at Sydney as a whole, the housing and unit market combined, last year 87% of all suburbs in Sydney saw an increase in value, whilst last month that number was 44%, equal to 3 months ago at 44%. So Sydney's becoming a bit more steady. The recovery begins in Sydney, and we also been purchasing quite a few property in Sydney as well for our customers, and it is quite competitive as well. Probably not as competitive as it has been in Brisbane, but definitely competitive. We have missed out on properties in Sydney for sure, and people definitely been paying over value, over true value or fair value for properties, so which is obviously not what we do. So people have been purchasing properties and spending a little bit more, but you can definitely get it wrong. As you can see, over 50% of suburbs in Sydney have been decreasing. Now, if we look at the rest of New South Wales before we wrap up, last year 67% of the housing market in Sydney the rest of New South Wales saw an increase in value. So that's Newcastle, Wollongong, then inside the inner regions of New South Wales, Orange and your South Coast, your North Coast, all of these combined, 67% of the housing market outside of Sydney, the rest of New South Wales last year saw an increase in value. 6 months ago, 3 months ago, and last month been pretty steady. All of them sitting at 59% of suburbs seeing an increase in value, whilst 41% saw a decrease in value. So the housing market outside of Sydney pretty steady, not too much going on. Obviously, it dropped since last year due to COVID, but haven't seen huge drops. Most suburbs still performing well. In terms of the unit market, again, the unit market is struggling more so outside of Sydney. We see 60% last year, 60% of suburbs in the unit market saw an increase in value, whilst last month that number dropped down to 40%. So if we do a combined housing and unit market, so combined market in the rest of New South Wales, last year 65% of the market, 65% of suburbs outside of Sydney saw an increase in value, and this time last month that was 55%, 3 months ago 54%, so 1% increase in total. So New South Wales holding on and doing not too badly. So that's a bit of a around the grounds wrap up, December wrap up, end of year wrap up, about what the suburbs and how the markets have been reacting this year. We will try and do these videos actually once a month, when new data comes out every month, and see how it's been progressing, and to keep you guys updated. But what I find very interesting there is those numbers of the actual suburbs that have increased or decreased. Maybe puts some perspective on you can actually get it wrong if you don't do your proper due diligence, if you don't do your proper research, if you're not stress testing your numbers, you can get it wrong, and you don't want to be falling into that category of suburbs that decrease in value and you don't want to be in negative equity, you don't want to be losing money. We don't invest in property to lose money, we invest in property to make money and real estate. So if you are looking to purchase a property, whether it's an investment or an owner-occupier, definitely reach out, send us a question, send us an email, let's have a chat. More than happy to help. Even if you just got a few questions, we'll be happy to answer them. But we really want to make sure everyone's getting this right, so you're not in the wrong bracket. We want to make sure you're in the green, not the red, and you can build equity, build growth, and continue to purchase property and set yourself up for the future and have a great financial future ahead of you. Otherwise, that's been all for this episode of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I've been keeping an eye on our microphone and the audio. It looks like it was coming in and out a little bit, so I do apologize if the audio was a little bit hard to hear. We'll try and fix it up in the edit. Thank you all for listening again. Our viewers keep increasing every week, so thank you so much to everyone that's listening. Thank you to our friends in France, in Clichy, who listen to every episode, and we've got people listening in New York and London. So thank you so much to all those people who have been tuning in on a weekly basis, and of course our friends in Australia who listen on a weekly. If you have any questions, please feel free to shoot us an email or contact us via our social media pages. We'll add them to our questions list. We'll do Q&As every few episodes because we're getting quite a lot of feedback from that. If you have any feedback regarding this episode or any episode in general, please send them through. I received some interesting feedback the other week from one of our listeners who has listened to every single episode. So thank you for listening to all the episodes. The feedback was, love your podcast. Thank you, Jess. Podcast is good. Information is great. However, apparently I say the word good a lot. So gonna try and stop saying the word good, pull out the thesaurus and have a look at some synonyms and try and change it up. So hopefully this episode I didn't use that word too much. Hopefully you enjoyed this one as well. Hopefully you get some value. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn. We're on it all. Follow us, like our stuff. You'll get an update every single time we put up a post. We do live videos sometimes on Instagram, so that don't go onto the pod, that don't go onto the Facebook. So you want to make sure you're on Instagram. We do Q&As on our Instagram stories. A lot of things are going on our social media pages. So please follow us. Give us a subscribe on the podcast as well, or on YouTube, or wherever you're listening to this. And please leave us a review. We'd love a review. Seeing reviews, it makes me so happy, whether they're good or not. We love a review. We'd love to know what we can do better. We'd love to know what we're doing good or great. And yeah, so send us an email at hello@firstbrick.com.au if you have any questions or queries. Otherwise, follow us, give us a like, pass the pod. If you know one person that would enjoy this podcast, please let them know about it. And we'll keep growing our community. It's an awesome community. There is also a Facebook page called Let's Talk Property Australia. Just a bunch of people like-minded that want to talk about property, ask their questions, and there's community there. So if you are on Facebook and you're looking for a group like that, Let's Talk Property Australia. Otherwise, we'll see you guys hopefully next week. Stay tuned for another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Ciao.